Hello, everyone. Caren Glasser here, and welcome to the Author Spotlight. Make sure you say hi in the comments and tell us where you are watching from. Today's show is sponsored by the Online Authors Office, a platform for aspiring writers who seek that quantum leap into marketing their work. And today we are diving deep with best-selling author Jason Masters. As the firstborn son of a World War II veteran, Jason grew up in a 1980s society where the murder of gay men was not uncommon. As a basketball enthusiast, he inspired his community as a coach. His coaching motto to teenage basketball players is, "You can't change the past, but you can influence the future." This motivation eerily returned to himself for his own healing. As an author, Jason shares a story that will not only help executives across the globe, but will empower the youth of today to live a life that they were born to have and to own. So without further ado, welcome to the stage. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thanks, Karen. Yourself? It's
I
wonderful
am
to be with you.
I am doing great as well. I am delighted that you're here today. Your story is amazing.
Thank
It's
you.
amazing, and I know it is doing such good in the world right now. So we're going to jump right in. I want to talk about your journey. You call yourself an accidental activist. First of all, I love the phrase, but I want to make sure that we all understand what you meant by that. What is an accidental activist?
So I think I've always been interested in social justice. When I left Adelaide, my home city of birth, and started my first professional job in Melbourne, I was very involved in the Uniting Church, which for your listeners is an Indigenous church here in Australia, a merger of the Congregational Methodists and most of the Presbyterians in 1977. And Melbourne was the epicenter, or is the epicenter of social justice. So I did social justice training through my church and was always interested, but never was it relevant to myself.
Right.
When I came out into a very difficult time here in Australia. Australia's only the second country in the world that's had a national vote over whether LGBTIQ plus people can get married. Ireland had to do it because of a constitution. Australia did it because the Conservative government at the time had been trying to delay and defer this. So I then suddenly found myself coming out, starting to discover who I was, and then getting involved in national politics and having to advocate for the right for LGBTIQ plus people to get married. And then from there, after there was success with we called it a postal survey, was how it was done. There was then a pushback from various conservative members of parliaments in the various layers of our system here in Australia um, that were starting to push for religious rights. And one of the things that happened here in New South Wales is one of the right wing parties called the Pauline Hanson One Nation Party um, put a bill into the New South Wales Parliament that effectively meant that teachers, groundskeepers, office staff, counsellors in schools, if they provided any support to transgender children or gender diverse children, would be sacked and teachers would lose their license. Pretty much what we're seeing across America at the
I was
moment.
just going to say that. It sounds like they're taking their road from what you guys went through. Wow,
Cor-
interesting.
Correct. And so I am involved in the LGBTIQ organisation in the Uniting Church called Uniting Network.
Hmm.
And so I started writing the submission to the parliamentary inquiry into that. Now, what was interesting is there was a lot of submissions from the conservative religious element. There were quite a few submissions from the LGBTIQ advocacy area. There were only 4 submissions from people or organisations that are religious opposing this legislation. The chair of the committee wouldn't allow any of us to be witnesses at his committee. So surprise, surprise. And so from that, I've been involved in other religious discrimination legislations and also the work towards banning conversion practices across Australia.
So, as you say, coming out as a gay executive has been a very long and arduous journey. Wow. So that is actually how you became an accidental activist, and you continue to this
Yes.
day because you have made a huge difference. And so you decided to write your book. It's a journey towards acceptance, an evolving memoir. So, did the book come out of what you were experiencing, or was it in addition to what? How did this happen?
So I think it happened when I came out. I found a group that unfortunately no longer exists called Freedom to Be. Um, and it was a group of Christian LGBTIQ people who would meet and sort of have speakers or talk about issues
Hmm.
and then go out and have dinner. Unfortunately, about a year after I joined, it sort of came to a natural end. Um, when people started to hear my story, they kept saying to me, Jason, you've got to write your story. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. I'm kind of the baby in the group, so to speak.
Right.
And so this kept happening and happening. And then in 2018, I went to a conference in Hong Kong. It was the Asia Pacific Rainbows Family Forum. And I was asked to be on a panel of speakers around faith, family, and the workplace. There was a transgender Pacifica woman. There was myself as a Christian gay man, and he was then living in Fiji, but a Muslim man was on this panel. And through that, I had mentioned I was thinking about writing my story. And at that point of time, I just had this concept that I would write something, PDF it, and put it up on a website. Now, one of the funny things about this conference is one of the sponsors was an international high school in Hong Kong. Um, they
Oh,
actually had quite a lot of LGBTIQ students. And so they actually ran a session at the conference and raised money to help bring an international speaker from a country. And it's one of these speakers that we weren't allowed to record, we weren't allowed to tweet about because if their government found out about what they were speaking about, they could be imprisoned or worse. Anyway, their teacher came up to me afterwards and said, you've got to write a story. It's really important, and you need to talk to Pashmina. She had published her book and done a lot of
right.
work with Pashmina from the online author's office. So that's when I started the process of starting to put the book together. So that's the genesis of it.
What is it like having a book like this that is your story and it's there for people to read? Is that emotional for you? Is this I mean, obviously you had never thought about doing this. You did it
Mm.
because people asked, but now that you've done it, this is quite the accomplishment.
Thank you. Yes, it is. And I think we had the official book launch in Sydney just recently. And Um, I've not been to many book launches, but ones that I've been to, it's basically been the author speaking all the time. And I thought I wanted to do something different. And so I had a well known sort of advocate for the community as the MC.
Mhm.
I had a very good friend of mine be interviewed about, when he got to know me in Sydney and what he observed of me coming out. Um, he interviewed my son. My daughter was doing the bookstore. And what we realised is that nearly 20 years ago was the first book of this genre in Australia was published, and
Oh,
mine is only the second.
oh,
And so
wow.
Anthony Ben Brown, who was the author of that first book, who was a Pentecostal pastor who was married and then came out, um, um, he and I have known each other since I've come out. And so he was interviewed and then he interviewed me. And so this whole thing that it's been 20 years almost since the first book to the second, I think says something about the challenge for people writing their stories. So I think I was pretty tired last week after having got the book out and now starting to think about, what might be some of the consequences. I have been constantly talking with my psychologist about this.
Right.
because there are very conservative religious elements in Australia, as there are in most countries, um, who know me for my advocacy work, who might then try and sort of attack me. So we've done some work to prepare for that and things like that.
So is it? I'm actually really happy to hear that you have somebody in your corner that you can talk to, because I can only guess. I am not obviously experienced in this, but I can only guess that anticipating what may come to you, to be prepared for it, is a smart thing, and I think that that helps other people as well, knowing that if they're going to walk your walk, that you're showing them how to walk that walk. So thank you for that. You've always been involved in social justice work, and I
Yep.
know that you mentioned that when you came out, it sort of narrowed that focus that you had for the LGBTIQ plus. It's hard to say all of those
Yeah, it
letters.
is.
Did I say it right? And you're focusing on that, but you also say that you're still in the learning phase. Talk to us about
Yes. So one of the things that we're seeing globally at the moment is a significant pushback on the transgender community. And in fact, I mentioned earlier that bill that the One Nation Party put here in New South Wales.
that. Mhm.
So that's meant that I've had to do a lot of research, and I find the historical parallels quite interesting. I never heard of the Stonewall riots in New York, but one of the things I learned as I started to look at that history was that the transgender women were some of the first people who started the defense of the hotel.
Interesting.
And what I found interesting was how I actually got to meet Anthony Van Brown, that author of that first book, was because a transgender woman was at I think an LGBTIQ plus business networking function I was at, and we were talking, and she was a little bit concerned that I may not have the support around me. And one of the things that happened out of Anthony's book was a lot of people were reaching out to him saying, I need help. And I'm saying through my book, I'm happy to do that as well.
Wow.
So, I was seeing this parallel between the transgender women helping that first movement in New York and transgender women then reaching out and trying to support me as well. So I figured that whilst things are improving for gay men, it's not
Mhm.
perfect yet by a long means,
Right.
but the community that's being attacked the most globally is transgender women.
Yeah.
So I would do a lot of work on that, and in fact, as we had a brief chat before we started, it's morning here. I normally not up this early. Um, Although some people would say, it's business hours, Jason. Um, but I've already been out tweeting, supporting an activist actor in the UK who has been pressured by J.K. Rowling's to take down some tweets. And she, does run quite an anti-LGBTIQ group. And I mainly wanted to support him. He was getting support from America, and I wanted to support him from Australia because um, I too have been forced to take down some tweets by powerful people. News Corp, which is the largest media organisation in the world, are very anti-LGBTIQ in their reporting. They had a journalist here who was regularly, at least every fortnight, if not more, putting out false information about transgender kids in Australia. And he forced me to take down some tweets as well. So the powerful, who are often the media are saying are being cancelled in this woke war,
Right.
actually have the power to actually silence the minorities. And so I wanted to give him some support.
So, wow. I'm just going to say wow. And did you think that this is what you would be doing when you chose to step into this world? Did
No,
you?
no, I
Yeah.
didn't. And it then becomes very interesting. And one of the things I'm tweeting a lot about is all this anti-LGBTIQ legislation in America, and And in fact, the way I phrased this tweet this morning to support this young actor in the UK was around to make sure I don't get sued, because the Americans who are responding have actually got federal law in America to protect them being sued by a foreign entity. We don't have that in Australia. So I had to be very careful in how I did my tweets. Um, I understand, I didn't see the tweet because it was taken down. Was some reference perhaps to fascist movements, Nazism, things like that.
Right.
Um, what most people don't understand about World War II history and the Nazi movement is everybody has heard about the Holocaust. Everybody has heard about what they did to the Jews.
But there were 11 million other people.
That's
So,
right. That's
yeah.
right. And one of the first acts of the Nazi youth movement was to destroy what in English roughly translates as the Institute of Sexology. Now, and this is where this whole false narrative about transgender people being very new.
Right.
Um, this institute was created, I think, around 1907, something like that.
It's not so new
Uh,
then. It's not so
it,
new.
not so new. Um, was supporting LGBTIQ people, but specifically, they did a huge amount of research around transgender people.
Mm.
So what these Nazi youth did as one of their first acts was to go to this institute, take all the books out, and there were 20,000 books around research around transgender people, plus all the clinical records, and burnt them. And then destroyed the actual institute. So, in many ways, what I'm trying to point out is history is repeating itself. The powerful go after the edge minority
Hmm.
and try and make them out as the awful people, so that generally us white people
Right.
need to, the race needs to be protected. And
Right.
that's the message I'm
It's
seeing
such
in
a,
America and the
yeah.
UK at the moment.
It's such a fear that makes absolutely no sense to me. It just doesn't make sense. People are people are people. If you're just tuning in right now, we are talking to Jason Masters about his new book, A Journey Towards Acceptance. I really, really encourage you to go and take a look at this book, pick up a copy. You can take your phone out right now and just scan it. It will take it. Well, don't do that right now, actually. I don't
No,
want you to do that right now, but do it later. So you can go check out the book. Um, how long did it take you to write this book?
a long time. So I started it around 2018. I'd done some preliminary work before that conference in Hong Kong. Then I started to engage with Pashmina. Um, it took me a while to find my voice
Hmm.
because being an executive, I was overthinking things.
Hmm.
And I was thinking about a structure. In my work, I've got to have an executive summary, and then I've got to have a scope of work, and then I've got to have the detailed findings, and then all the supporting appendices and all that sort of stuff. And that's not how you write a memoir. And I was also writing it very formally, and so also I didn't understand the process. I thought I needed to understand the process first. And what Pashmina really helped me understand is I just need to write,
Right.
and just writing every day. And I didn't always do that, but that
But
was
you
the
did
plan.
it enough to finally, come
Yeah,
out with this book.
exactly.
Pashmina, I hope your ears are burning. We are talking about you. She's an amazing woman, and
Yes,
clearly she had a great impact on you in order
yes,
to get you to actually do this.
exactly.
Um,
And it was one of the early sort of chapter editors that helped me change my writing style a bit,
mhm.
and that led to a very different voice, and it was really the voice of the inner me, not the voice of the executive, so to speak. And then it started to work from there. We got very, very close, and then COVID hit. And on the first day of lockdown, I had a very bad accident, and I'm still almost 3 years downstream, still dealing with the consequences of that. So that had a significant delay factor. Plus, there's all these other things that I didn't think about having to do as an author, particularly for a memoir. In fact, at church the other week, there's a couple of other authors in my church, and he said, "This is the reason why I do fiction, not non-fiction, because I don't have to do all this administrative work you did, which is for everybody that is, or any organisation
To get
that is either mentioned or could be identified, has to give their release."
right.
And so there were some issues with that. The church wouldn't approve one particular chapter, and I had to rewrite that.
Got it.
Um, I had to get um, a release from my ex-wife, and we needed a mediator to help with that because she's a very private person. She didn't want
Right.
anything out there. So that took quite a while to get through. And then there's the final editing process and all that sort of stuff.
So, are you going to do another book?
So it's interesting. When we created the subtitle, An Evolving Memoir, I think Rich Miller was saying, "You're relatively young, Jason. There could be another book, and it's
Right.
not a complete memoir." I'm Once we get through this sort of release and promotional process, I am thinking of starting the sequel, which will be about um, having an accident, living through COVID, and recovering through COVID. Now I've got a disability in my left arm, and doing all of that. That 3 or 4 year period it'll end up being. So that's what I'm thinking at the moment.
Well, we're going to be waiting for that. I want you to know we're going to be waiting for that. So I always like to ask my guests, no matter what field they're in, I always want to know why people do what they do. What is your big why? Why are you doing this?
I think I'm doing this because there is so much still unknown about the LGBTIQ community in our society. Um, what I see, if I go back to the transgender issue, is arguments that were in the 1970s presented about gay people are now being rehashed around transgender people. So I think that's part of it. I think another part of it is the importance of representation, and one of the things that was important to me, I went to a program at Stanford University in California there. They have their master's program. They have a variety of other programs. They also have in the American summer week-long programs, and they for a long time just run an executive leadership program. They then modified it to create one for women. They then modified it again to create one for Asian executives. And then in about 2015-16, they created one for LGBTIQ executives. So I went to the third one of that. I had started to wearing a watch band that's sort of pride related, and I had two. One like this that was very obvious pride, and another one that if you kind of knew, you knew, but for most people they wouldn't know. And that's what I wore to work and things like that. And I would wear an earlier version of this one when I went out with my LGBTIQ friends. So when I went to Stanford, I thought, well, if I can't wear this all the time while I'm there, I'm really still got a long way to process who I am. So I did. And what was interesting is one activist from America towards the end of the week said, "You've worn this all week, and I think I need to do the same. I've been too scared to do that." So that was interesting, even amongst people who are, it's 50 people, some of the most amazing leaders from around the world.
That they were inspired by you. They were
Yes,
inspired by
that's
you.
right.
Wow.
So when I came back, I had been working in the cemetery space here in Australia. I was at a government cemetery. They had a board that they had to dismantle, and I went in as the board of one, so to speak. And it was through that process that I was also coming out. So it was actually a good place for me, and I had a hugely supportive chief executive. Soon after that, I was asked to step in to be the CEO for another cemetery, um, where there were some issues, and I thought, right, now is the time to start afresh as a gay executive. And so I wore my band every day. That was now my standard uh, wristwatch. But the big change for me was not hiding who I was. So beforehand, if people said to me, "What are you doing at the weekend?" If I had been doing something with my community, I would just say, "Oh, I was out with a group of friends." Um, Soon after I started this role, we were leading into the Mardi Gras season. World Pride starts today, Sydney Mardi Gras. And I then thought, when if somebody asked me, "What are you doing this weekend?" It was, well, actually, a group of us are getting together to practice the drumming for our group marching in the Mardi Gras parade.
Love it.
So that was the big change. And what that then did was open some doors that would not have been there.
Right.
Um, One manager came to me and said, "Oh, I know I've got a lesbian employee. She's been on paternity leave because her partner had the child. Is there anything I need to do when she comes back?"
Wow.
And I said, "Well, what would you do when any other employee come back?" Oh, I just asked how the child was going, how their partner was going. So
Thanks.
just keep those conversations going. It's just
Right.
a normal family situation. And then started the kind of the sad part. My head of sales and marketing came to me and said, "I wish you'd been here a few months ago." And I said, "Oh, why is that?" And she said, "Well, we had a funeral for an early 30s male dentist who committed suicide. And we found out he was gay. He was part of the Greek Orthodox community, and the church wouldn't participate in the funeral at all. And his parents were really struggling, and then his friends didn't know how to, work. And I'm sure you could have done something." I said, "I don't know what I would have done, but I probably just could have helped facilitate some things." And
Right.
then later on, um, we had two big cemetery sites, and at the other cemetery site, again, the executive responsible for sales and marketing came and said to me, "Jason, we're at our wits' end. I don't know what to do. Tell me the story." And she said, "Well, a few years ago, two women bought side by side plots. They were lesbians. That weren't that old. They were expecting to have a long life. And then last year, um, one of the partners died." Oh, that's sad. So they've got a tombstone that goes across both plots. And so on the first one, it's Jane Smith, partner of Mary James, and born, died, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And the family of the woman who died would regularly come out and cross out, scratch the tombstone to cross out the word partner, partner of. And unfortunately, we didn't have cameras that could pick it up. So I said, well, there is a specialist group in the New South Wales Police Force, which does have a difficult reputation with the community, that is focused on LGBTIQ people and often resourced by LGBTIQ people. Let's go and have a chat with them and see what we could do. So we're talking 2020 in Australia, that people are still going and crossing out. Yeah, can you imagine the outrage if somebody went to a Jewish tombstone and defaced it?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
It almost, Jason, it almost, I'm listening to you and I'm hearing you and I'm just incredulous. The fact that this happens, and I know it's not isolated, I know it happens all over the place. And I have to believe that you go home every day saying, I'm making a difference in
yeah,
people's life. So
yeah.
kudos to you. Wow. If you're just tuning in, we are talking to Jason Masters. We're talking about his new book, A Journey Towards Acceptance. Um, I am sure that people are going to want to follow you and see what's up with you as you continue on this journey that you're on. No pun intended. The website is called A Journey Towards Life. Check it out. And I'm about to give everyone all of your social media. This Jason, you're everywhere. You are really
Yep.
everywhere. So first, if you play on Twitter, go check him out at JP Masters. If you are on Instagram, go check him out at Jason P Masters. If you happen to play on TikTok, yes, you, if you happen to play on TikTok, go to jasonmasters.aus. You're also on YouTube. I wasn't kidding. He's everywhere. A Journey Towards Acceptance. And also, you have a Facebook page that is wrapped around the book at A Journey Towards Acceptance. And also, they can just go and check you out on Facebook. Plain and simple, jason.p.masters. You are everywhere. I'm exhausted just saying all of these things, and I'm actually laughing because I'm on every one of those platforms as well. So I think we've been connecting this past week on all of these platforms to get your message out. And I really I applaud you. I applaud you for being vulnerable in the face of, I am sure, a lot of things that you did not want to have to deal with. And but you are a walking example. You don't just talk the talk; you are walking your talk. Any last thoughts that you would like to share that maybe we did not talk at all about? Because I don't want to leave without you being able to say your piece.
So I think there are two things that I probably want to just mention, and the first one is the coming out process. I've tried to outline what the process was for me. Everybody is different. What I think is really important is that you find your own rhythm in the process. And the best advice I received from my psychologist and my pastoral carer in my church was I didn't need to tell anybody, which is one of the things I felt I needed to do because I felt like I'd perhaps been a bit of a fraud in my life. So what they encouraged me to think about is, who do I want to tell? Um, why do I want to tell them? And what do I want to get out of it? And for me, that was the really hard part, because in hiding who I was always pretty much ensuring I never focused on myself. And so the thought of actually thinking about who I wanted to tell and what I needed to get out of it was a really important part of the journey for me, that I'm actually a valuable person and I do deserve to have some positive things coming out of what I was going to be doing with telling people. I think the other thing was around, and sorry, I've just it's just run out of my head at the moment. So maybe if you want to make any comment on that, and I'll just get the brain cells going on the other one.
We will leave the one, and if you want to come back and share your second thing, I would love to have you back on.
That'd be lovely.
You have been watching this amazing man who has done so much in actually a very short amount of time and has so much more to do. I'm going to be following you, Jason Masters. I'm going to see what you're going to be doing next. I want to thank you for taking time in the early morning where you are to be on the show today. And I want to thank our viewers. You have a choice as to how you spend your time. You chose to spend it with Jason and I today, and we are eternally grateful for that. So I encourage you to go out, give somebody an awesome day, and we'll see you next time on the Author Spotlight. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.